And the fact that you can still buy his design today, 31 years later, as a brand new amp, that's like buying a brand new vintage amp, right? It's awesome. Welcome back, everybody. Today I want to talk about a really cool integrated amp that is pure tube, all analog, American made, been in production in the same way, hand-wired point-to-point wiring for 31 years. This amp has been in production for 31 years, and while you can order it with some modern upgrades, I have the stock version here just as it was built back in 1994. Now I'm talking about the Cary Audio 300 SEI, and I believe that stands for single-ended integrated. This is a set amp, a single-ended triode amp, and in my opinion, a tube amp of this kind offers the sweetest, most immersive, most heart-tugging sound you can buy today. Single-ended triode amps bring that warmth, that glow, the holographic immersion, and it does so without ever being lean, strident, fast. These are not fast amps. It just has a way of oomph connecting with you, letting the music, all of that emotion come out of the music. Now, a lot of people think that a 300B amp can't power or can't deliver performance with all genres of music. I beg to differ. I'll talk about this in this video, but a couple of weeks ago, I reviewed a Chinese-made 300B integrated amp, the OILILY 300B. And that amp is still here, never one problem. It's dead quiet. It sounds amazing. I've been tube rolling with it and experimenting, but I wanted to get a hold of an American-made, legendary amp, 31 years in production. I wanted to get the Cary Audio 300 SEI here, to compare, right? To see how much better is an American-made 300B amp that costs 3 or 4 times the amount as the OILILY. Now, before I get into which one I liked better, the different sound qualities, the build features, all of that, these are 300B amps I'm talking about. They have very low wattage. In the case of the Cary, they claim this puts out 15 watts per channel. Now, in my listening in this room over the years with whatever speakers I've had in here, I usually don't go over using 5 watts. On occasion, I might pump it to 10, right? I don't use much power in this 13 by 18 space. And right now, I have my Icon 12 speakers from Audio from Norway. I believe they're 92 to 94 dB efficient, so they're pretty easy to drive. And these are a prime candidate for an amp like the Cary 300 SEI or any 300B, any single-ended triode amp, because single-ended triode amps are always of the lower wattage variety. Now that OILILY puts out 8 watts per channel, so according to Cary specs, it should put out almost twice as much power. Now, before I talk about all of that, let me back up. Back when this came out in 1994, I believe it was 1998 that I really wanted one of these. It was a dream amp of mine back then. I had horns, I was running horn speakers. I just really never got around to getting one. The times when I was really wanting one, I didn't have the money to buy it. Now, back in 2021, I searched my history on Amazon. I saw one of these 300 SEIs on Amazon being shipped via Prime, sold by Amazon, and it was $3,800. And I believe at that time on Cary's website, they were selling them for like $50-some hundred. They show the retail at $6,800. And I bought it back then in 2021. I was going to review it here. When it came, it had a broken knob. The transformers buzzed really loud where I couldn't even listen to the music. I sent it right back to Amazon and got a refund. Lo and behold, a few weeks ago, I was on Amazon and I typed in Cary Audio. And one thing popped up, and it was a 300 SEI. And it had a weird description like Soundsational Cary Audio Amp or something. But it was the 300 SEI. And I said, that's weird that they have another one When I bought that one in 21, they had one in stock. I sent it back. I said, they surely haven't kept the one I sent back for 4 years and are reselling it. So the price was $3,800, $3,600. And I said, well, I don't have that money right now, but if this happens to go down to, say, $2,800, I'll buy it. I put it in my cart in the saved for later. The next day I checked, and it was at $3,200. The next day I checked, it was at $2,899. The next day I checked, it was at $2,407. I bit the bullet knowing I could return it if there was a problem. When the amp showed up, the box, the outer box, was opened and resealed. So I was like, this is the one that I bought, and I think they're just reselling it. But when I opened up that box, I filmed it just to be sure there were no surprises. The box inside was perfectly sealed from the Cary factory. I opened that up. Everything was factory fresh. So I took it out. I noticed the very oddball remote that shipped with this, but I set it to the side, and I hooked it up. And I was praying, I was hoping, I was like, please don't buzz. Don't have that transformer buzz. The input selector switch that was broken on the one from 2021 was working perfectly fine. It seemed solid. Everything looked beautiful. I plugged in all the tubes. I hooked everything up, hooked it up to the Ever Solo TH streamer, the Fez Equinox DAC, and I turned it on. And as the days went forward, I noticed there was a little buzz coming from it, but I couldn't hear it at my seat. And I'd have to walk up to it to really hear it. It was more like a vibration. Now the OILILY that I paid $1,100 for is dead silent in all ways. It warms up for 30 seconds, makes some noises, and then it just levels out. The Cary, even at my seat, I don't hear it. And so I was happy, right? So I had a bunch of tubes that also came in. I had some tubes from raytubes.com. They sent me some 300B reserve tubes. They're best that they make. I believe these are close to 900, 1,000 a pair. I could be wrong, but they're somewhere between 8 and 1,000 a pair. And then Pavane, PS Vane, however you say it, sent me a whole slew of tubes, 845s, 6SN7s, 300Bs, KT88s from their Summit series. So lo and behold, the Cary 300 SEI uses two 300B tubes and three 6SN7s. Two of those 6SN7s are for the preamp. And it's funny because in my world, my likes, my favorite tubes of all time are 300B, 6SN7, and 845s. So the Cary uses the two of my favorite tube types. I first ran it with the stock tubes, and the sound was beautiful. I would say compared to the OILILY out of the gate, I noticed it seemed like it had more sense of power and slam. The drums were bigger. The mid bass seemed bigger, but it wasn't making everything too puffy, right? It was almost perfect. And when I switched the OILILY back in, it was a little leaner in the mid bass and a little more holographic. But going back to the Cary, I'll talk about those two side by side in a minute. The fit and finish of the Cary is just beautiful. It has a black faceplate. I think you can get silver too. The chassis is painted in a black anthracite paint, very deep. It has the scripted text on the front, Cary 300 SEI. Cary always makes beautiful tube products. Now, these were all designed, this amp was designed by Dennis Had back in the day, back in 1994. And Dennis ran Cary Audio, and he would create and design all of the tube designs. The 805Cs that I had, they're beautiful. The SLP05 preamp, beautiful. The SLP98 preamp, beautiful. I used to have the Rocket 88, the V12R amps, all beautiful, timeless, elegant works of art. The 300 SEI is no different. And what's interesting is that Cary is still selling these 31 years later in their original form, which is a beautiful thing, because after I've spent days and days listening to the Cary and how it just sucked me in, right? The immersiveness of a good 300B design can really, really just melt you into your chair and give you the goosebumps. And the Cary had a refinement, a solidity to the sound, very solid. It couldn't sound any different from, say, the Devulet Astra I have here, which is fast, lightning quick, right? A little leaner in the mids, a little more exposed up top in the treble. The Cary has bigger bass than the Devillet Astra. It has a sweeter treble, but it's a little rolled off in comparison. But the mid-range has some oomph to it and solidity, and this is what fleshes out everything. I was listening to, on the Cary 300 SEI, I was listening to heavy metal. I was listening to thrash metal. I was listening to 70s rock and classics. I was listening to 80s pop, which we all know 80s pop was recorded horribly back in the day. But on this, that mid bass fleshes everything out and it sounds beautiful. I think the reason I like it so much is because modern day tube amps, or some of them, some modern day tube amps, have a fast, leaner sound, and they're trying to sound more like solid state, where tubes of the 60s and 70s were very tubby, bloated, and almost boring, some of them. What Cary has done in 1994 when they designed this, when Dennis designed this, and by the way, Dennis retired many, many years ago from Cary. It's now run by Billy Wright, who I believe was Dennis's partner back in the day. So Cary still releases new products. They're almost always solid state products. I haven't seen a new tube design, maybe the SLI 100. I had the SLI 80 back in the day too. But just to go back, Dennis no longer is with Cary. He makes amps at his kitchen table in his home and sells them on eBay at this time. But everything about this amp is just gorgeous. It has a timeless appeal. It looks like a work of art. And after a bit of listening to it with the stock tubes, I decided to throw in those 300B reserve tubes from raytubes.com. Now, if you go to raytubes.com, they have a reserve tube section that they say are not for everybody because these tubes are a little bit pricey, but these are the best tubes they know how to make. I put those in and there was an instant improvement to that mid area. I don't know if I say improvement, but a change. The mid bass lightened up a little bit. There was more clarity, more dynamics, more slam, and the treble became a little more extended. I'd say by 15% or so. Had a really electric sound, really nice sound, but it was also at the same time smooth. The voices were big and present. I then put in the Pavane Summit Series 300Bs, and I noticed, again, versus stock, more apparent detail coming through. But these had a luxurious richness to them, a little bit of warmth and glow, and they really excelled with ambient music, anything with spatial qualities. I mean, it was just unreal good. Floor to ceiling, wall to wall soundstage, and beautiful organic imaging within. I then threw in the Summit Series 6S and 7s, which look really, really cool. And that just made the 300 SEI sound absolutely incredible. No crackles, no pops, smooth, extended, beautiful. The bass tightened up a bit with the stock tubes. It was a little tubby. With the improved tubes, tightened it up, but the amount of bass was still there. That's the best I've heard of the 300 SEI. So I was listening to it with this full complement of Summit tubes. Now the Ray tubes were awesome as well. It's just a different kind of vibe. You pick the vibe you like when it comes to tuning your tube amp. And that's what tube rolling is all about. But those 6S and 7s from the Summit series are absolutely incredible. I like them better than the new old stock Pope tubes that I've always raved about. These are, I believe, are, from what I've heard, I've never heard a better 6S and 7 new production tube. Haven't heard the Ray tube select yet, but the Pavane Summits are absolutely awesome. I couldn't believe it. I actually preferred both the Ray tubes and the Summit tubes, and some people might say, hey, that's not true, but for me it is. I also had some Western Electric 300B tubes here that I had from a couple years ago. And the Western Electrics are a beautiful tube. They give you a big, long warranty. They're made at the Western Electric factory, and they are legendary. They come in the wooden box. And, you know, I've had Western Electric tubes in my life probably for the last 20 years, and they come out with various amplifiers. Now, these are more lighter footed. They have less mid bass. They're more airy, right? They're more about the holographic spatial immersion, but the bass is lighter. they didn't, for me, sound as good as the full suite of those Summit tubes from Pavane. But anyway, you have your choices with this amp, and the 6SN7 preamps tubes really make a big difference. So I was like, wow, there's no way the OILILY can match this. So after some time listening to the Cary, I pulled it out. I put the Chinese amp in, right? Remember, this cost $1,100. So I put the OILILY in. I took the Cary out, expecting the sound to kind of collapse. You know, I've been listening to this luxurious, beautiful 300B set amp that is a perfect mate to these speakers behind me or any sensitive speaker. The Fez Equinox DAC has this beautiful sound. It runs on a tube 2. And of course, the Eversolo streamer is supplying the digital bits. I turn it on, and what do I hear? I'm blown away again by the OILILY. Now, it has less of that mid bass and a little more treble extension, but the bottom bass is just as big as the Cary. Now, when I switched the 300B tubes in the OILILY to the Ray tubes, the reserves 300B, that just went off the charts good. More refinement, more solidity, a smoother vibe in the treble, and just an overall extremely holographic big soundstage sound. Not as dense, not as beefy, or I would say not as impactful as the Cary, but maybe there is something to the 8 watt, 15 watt, I don't know. But they both sounded absolutely beautiful. I mean, beautiful. And you know, I'm like, man, I could live with either one of these as my 300B set amp when I want to have that vibe of I want to sit back, relax, and chill. But then I was like, well, the OILILY has one input, the Cary has 3, right? So that's an improvement right then and there. Sound-wise, I slightly prefer the Cary. So I believe I'm going to keep the Cary here, and I put the OILILY up at my website, stevehufpphoto.com. In the used gear for sale, I have the OILILY there for sale if someone wants to buy one in perfect condition that has 0 noise and is in the factory packaging without the 2-month wait that you have to wait for one of those now. Beautiful amp, incredible value for the money. So the Cary is indeed a very special amp, and other things I want to talk about are, this is such an old school amp, it doesn't have auto biasing. It ships with a biasing cable, but you'll need a multimeter. You basically hook it up, set it to DC, and follow the instructions, and you bias this amp between 150 and 160. You check your bias every few months or so to make sure the tubes are biased and everything's running good. It takes about 5 minutes. You plug it into the top of the amp and you take a screwdriver and you turn the bias control until your multimeter reads the proper amount. Now, going back to if you buy one of these from Cary Direct, they have the stock version, which is what I have. And I believe this is, for me anyway, the best version to get. You can get upgraded capacitors, upgraded speaker binding posts. They sell some other upgrades. And what these upgrades do, I've heard one of these 300 SEIs that was fully loaded. It makes it sound a little more modern, a little more snap, crackle, and pop, a little leaner in that mid bass, a little more electric. But for me, if I'm buying a single-ended triode, I want something that gives that sound, that luscious, beautiful glow, that sound, that coloration that's in there is absolutely stunning. So I would recommend sticking with the stock 300 SEI. What else can I tell you about this? If you get a 300B set amp, the main magical sound of a 300B is in the voice, the mid-range. The voice is absolutely beautiful. And with the Cary, the voice is big and it comes out forward. With the OILILY, the voice is big, but not as big, and it stays between the speakers. But the Cary has this way of bringing voices out, and female vocals with the 300B tube are just eerie good, goosebump inducing. If you want the singer in front of your chair by a couple feet when you close your eyes and you sit there and soak it in, a 300B set amp is the way to go. Now, there's a lot of 300B amps out there, and the one you choose should be chosen from your preferences. I have a soft spot for Cary because they were my first hi-fi love back in the mid to late 90s. That's when I was buying all Cary gear. I had their CD players, their preamps, as I said, a couple of different amps. I had their 805C monoblocks, which were stunningly good back in the day. I really loved Dennis's designs. And the fact that you can still buy his design today, 31 years later, as a brand new amp, that's like buying a brand new vintage amp, right? It's awesome. And it's cool to just have in the collection or as a second amp if you want that 300B vibe. So yeah, I love the Cary 300 SEI. It eked out over the OILILY only because it has 3 inputs instead of 1. I like the looks of it better, and I love that 6SN7 tube as a preamp tube, and that's what the Cary uses. So for me, choosing an amp like this, the 300 SEI, I've been wanting it for what, 27 years, and it's finally here, and I have one that works and sounds beautiful. So yeah, that's my take on the Cary 300 SEI. Pair it with speakers that are sensitive. I'd say between 90 dB efficient and up. You can go all the way up to 107 dB efficient. Now this is not inherently a noisy amp, but if I go up to it and get close, I do hear a little vibration from the transformers. This is usually normal in tube amps, especially older designs. A lot of newer designs have found ways to combat this. I'm not sure how, but I can get a tube amp in here that buzzes loud. I can get another one in here that's deathly silent. But this one has no offensive buzzing or hum. It's just slight, and it's a killer amp. So yeah, highest recommendation if you're looking for a 300B American-made single-ended triode amp that is a pure classic. It's legendary at this point. So yeah, I hope you liked this video. If you did, thumbs up and subscribe. I have a written review of the Cary over at my website. I will link to that below. I'm also selling that OILILY. I expect it'll sell quick. I can ship it out in the next couple of days. Beautiful amp. I hope I don't regret that one, but with the Cary here, how could I, right? So I'll see you guys next time. Bye.